Welcome to Coffee with Ken, a podcast devoted to the music of Oklahoma and those who create it. Your host, Ken Childers, is a lifelong music lover, former radio guy, and current newspaper editor. In each episode, we'll take a look, as well as a listen, to the singers, songwriters, and performers who have Oklahoma roots. So grab your mug, sit back, and enjoy this episode of Coffee with Ken.
My guest today is Doug Miller. He is an associate professor of history at OSU. And you're from Illinois, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And how long have you been in Oklahoma, Doug?
I've been in Oklahoma for 15 years. Yeah, 15 years between Norman and Stillwater.
Okay.
So now when people ask me where I'm from, I don't do the bit where like, well, I'm from Illinois, but I live in Oklahoma. Now I'm from Oklahoma. I've been here 15 years. I'm an Oklahoma.
That's long enough. That's long enough to make you citizen.
Yeah.
Well, great. And our topic today is an incredible musician from Norman, Oklahoma, and it's not Vince Gill. Vince is awesome. We love Vince, and he gets a lot of the spotlight. He's in the spotlight all the time. But the guy we're going to talk about today, he flew under the radar a little bit, at least as far as I'm concerned. He was he was a side man for a whole lot of people. And I don't think a lot of people know that he's from Oklahoma. And his name is Jesse Ed Davis. And he's from Norman. He got started there, I guess, playing around the OU campus with different bands. Then went on to California, made a big name for himself. And in my estimation, the guitar solo on Jackson Browne's Doctor My Eyes is one of the best in rock history. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's where I first became aware of Jesse, even though I didn't know it. Yes.
Yes. So what inspired you to write a book about him?
Well, as you're suggesting, Ken, this is someone whose body of work, in my estimation, is more significant and more important than his media profile tends to acknowledge. So whether that's the internet or rock and roll magazines or just wherever, people are reading about guitar players. My impression after I started to become aware of Jesse myself and saw his name turning up all over my record collection gradually year after year, my impression was that someone needed to devote more attention to learning his story, to share his story. I'm a lifelong music fan since I was a little kid. I was listening to Jackson Browne records and Bob Seger records and Kiss and the Cars and Cheap Trick and all the stuff you would, associate with sort of the late 70s there as I was first getting into my parents' vinyl collection. And as a fan of music, I always want to know the stories behind the musicians, behind the artists. I want a sort of complete picture of where the music comes from. And with Jesse Ed Davis, I couldn't do that with him the way I could with everyone else in my record collection. If you came over to my house and just started pulling records down and hey, Doug, who's this? Well, how much time you got, Ken? Because I'm going to give you a lecture, right? With Jesse, I was stumped, and there's sort of a mystery to me that there was a mystery. There's a mystery about the mystery. Why don't I know what I don't know about him? What explains that? So I went and tried to find something about him, and there just wasn't much out there. After I got deeper into the project, I realized that some of what's out there is just incorrect in terms of the basic facts of who he was and where he lived and so forth. So then I started to feel some kind of responsibility as a professional historian, as a musician myself, and as a fan of Jesse Ed Davis to see if I could learn more and bring something to the table. Because Jesse Ed Davis was, and to some degree, still is, no matter how hard we try, he's not going to just become a household name by virtue of our recent efforts to raise his profile. But among Native American people, Jesse Ed Davis is pretty well known. Native people across tribal lines tend to know who he is and celebrate him as one of their own who made the big time in music. And then among guitar players, among real guitar enthusiasts, I never stop running into people who they need no introduction. They know the Taj Mahal records, they know Dr. My Eyes, they
Right.
know all his greatest work. So there was a sort of community of Jesse Ed Davis fans who have been keeping his name alive all these years. And that provided a sort of base of support for me to gain some insight and some confidence and know that there are people out here who want to see this book come together.
Okay. Now, how did you go about getting your research? Did you talk to family members, bandmates? Where did you go?
It was a great challenge. When Jesse Ed Davis when he died in 1988, he was struggling. Well, needless to say, he was struggling with his health. He was struggling with sobriety, and life was hard for him at that time. On one
Mhm.
hand, he was out playing with John Trudell and the Graffiti Band, and they were doing great gigs and making incredible music together. At the same time, Jesse was kind of, uh, in and out of his apartment a little bit and didn't have many belongings, and most of his guitars and his stuff that he had from his heyday were kind of long gone. And my point here is that there was no great paper trail for me to follow. There's no Jesse Ed Davis archive. I couldn't go to a typical university special collections or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or wherever and like bring me the Jesse Ed Davis stuff. I'm going to write a book on
Right.
it. There's no such thing. So I had to make an archive before I could make the book. And the archive took many forms, but the two sort of great pillars of it were oral histories that I conducted with friends, family, and music collaborators. And I conducted over 120 interviews.
Oh,
And
well.
then the music itself is the archive. The actual records, right down to reading the liner notes. Wow, who's that guy? Wait, I know that name from this David Blue record over here, right? And you start connecting the dots, and the records themselves become roadmaps into Jesse Ed Davis's career and his history. And then the songs. Being a guitar player myself, I was a former touring and recording musician. I know how to hear the music and get some story
Right.
out of that too. So I had to be creative in order to put this book together. Many people at the beginning told me, I don't know. I think what you're trying to do is great, but I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if you can do a book on Jesse Davis. Just there's no material out there. I had to be creative, and it worked.
Okay. And about how long did it take you? A couple of years, 3 years,
5 years
5 years?
from,
Wow.
yeah, from the time I really started working on it in earnest to the date I sent my editor my manuscript.
Right. And it's been out, what, a year now?
Coming up on a year, November 14th, give or take, mid-November.
Okay. Okay. Great. Now, Jesse Ed Davis, I've heard Greg Allman in interviews name check him, and he actually inspired Duane to play slide. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. There are some great features of Jesse's story that they almost sound like, well, come on, that's exaggerated, right? Or that's a tall tale, or that's the
Right.
mythology that all the great musicians. Um, that's true. Duane Allman explained this several times. Greg Allman explained it several times through various media that Duane was inspired to play slide guitar because of the first Taj Mahal record that features Jesse Ed Davis. And the Allman Brothers did their, did the they played the Taj Mahal version of Statesboro Blues, and it became
Right.
an iconic Allman Brothers song. And you can hear in the Allman Brothers version of Statesboro Blues Jesse's direct influence on Duane's playing. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And he had a little bit of maybe an unlikely start with Conway Twitty.
Yes. Yeah. This is one of my favorite chapters of Jesse's story because he's coming up, as you mentioned, Ken, he was born in Norman on September 21st, 1944. His father was a Comanche, Cheyenne, Seminole, and Muskogee person who had just come back from service in World War II in the Navy. And Jesse's mother was Kiowa. And she was a student at OU too. She had just finished up and was working as an administrative assistant in the zoology department when they had Jesse in 1944. Jesse then grew up in Oklahoma City. They moved to the city when he was 5 because his parents got a job at Tinker Air Force Base. They had other family living in the city. And eventually, Jesse goes to college at OU, just like his mom and dad did, and many other members of his family. And he was a fledgling English student. He wanted to become an English teacher, but he couldn't stop dreaming about rock and roll. And he would frequently go over to the Spring Lake amusement park, uh, which no longer exists in Oklahoma City.
I've been there a few times.
You had been there. Wow.
Yeah,
And
I'm old. So I've
hey,
been there.
it's always I love imagining the Spring Lake amusement park.
Yeah.
It was just across the field from the house Jesse lived in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
He could just walk to the amusement
Oh,
park.
well.
And Conway Twitty would often play at the park. Johnny Cash would play there. Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks.
Oh, wow.
Jesse would go see these bands play, and he would push his way up to the front row so he could study these guitar players, Al Bruno, Robbie Robertson, and others. And eventually, Jesse started making his way not just to the front of the stage, but to the backstage. And he just wanted to soak in as much information and insight from these guitar players as possible. And then one day, he's not just backstage, he's on stage with Conway Twitty in August 1963 while he's a student at OU. He plays with Conway off and on for 3 years, goes
Oh,
on the
wow.
road with him, plays in Oklahoma City with him. And it's a really great chapter, at least in my reading of Jesse's life, because the whole world's in front of him still. He's playing with Conway, who had already had a #1 hit on the music charts. And here he is, this Native American kid from Oklahoma City, and he's doing it. And it's for me, it's a really beautiful part of his story. Jesse would play with Conway Twitty, but he also had his own group called the Continentals. And Jesse's girlfriend at the time, I interviewed her, and she becomes his fiance while he's at OU. They don't stay together, but they were partners for many years. I had a lot of people that I could talk to about the Conway Twitty years, but I didn't have Conway or Al Bruno
Right.
directly, and I wish I did.
Now, when I was in Oklahoma City about a year ago, you had an event, a book signing, and you got up and talked a little bit. You read some from the book, and they had one of Jesse's guitars on display. Is that still up there for folks to see? Or
That guitar then moved over to our exhibit at the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa,
okay,
which I co-curated with Joy Harjo, the Muskogee poet.
right, right,
And that exhibit ran from November, and it coincided with the book's release, up into June, just this past summer. So the exhibit's down, and now the guitar is back with the OK Pop Museum.
okay.
OK Pop owns the guitar and the amplifier that we showed in the Dylan Center exhibit.
That was
And
a basement, right?
that was a Bassman,
Yeah.
absolutely right, a 55 Bassman. And
Wow.
those will be on display in the OK Pop Museum.
Okay, great. And that's in Tulsa.
Yes.
Okay. When I stood in front of that guitar, I was a little bit surprised because that's not your typical Telecaster.
No.
That looks like some kind of hot rodded Telecaster to me.
Yeah, it is. So right in the Dylan Center exhibit, we also had one of Jesse's high school guitars. This very interesting, really unique Gibson 345 that has some certain features that were special to it. And then we had, as you mentioned, Ken, we had Jesse's yellow Telecaster that he played with John Trudell and the Graffiti Band in the final years of his life, 1986, 87, 88, up until Jesse passed. It's a Japanese Telecaster with a graphite neck. It's a really strange guitar. I got to hold it and play just a couple chords on it one afternoon at the OK Pop archive, and I've never seen another Telecaster like it. It's got a bunch of toggle switches on it. I don't know what they all do. Jesse loved that guitar, though. Here's the operative point. Toward the end of Jesse's life, as he was unwell and struggling to stay healthy, he often pawned his guitars. They were hung up in pawn shops, and he was really desperate at times for cash. That yellow Telecaster somehow survived those difficult years with Jesse. And in the end, it's we know where it is, and people can go see it. Whereas all of Jesse's other kind of famous guitars, if you're a big Jesse fan, and the ones you see in all the pictures, we don't know where they are. They're long gone.
I think Bob Britt has one, doesn't he?
Bob Britt is the person who donated that yellow Telecaster to
Oh, really?
Bob.
Okay.
Bob
Okay.
Britt is Bob Dylan's guitar player, has
Right.
been for many years. And Bob Britt was given that guitar by Jesse's widow, Kelly Davis. Jesse
Okay.
loved Bob Britt's guitar playing. Jesse would go see Bob when he would play with Leon Russell in the 1980s. And Jesse really loved Bob Britt's guitar work. And when Jesse passed, his wife gave it to Bob. It was sitting up
Okay.
in Bob's attic for many years. And finally, he just called around a little bit in Oklahoma and talked to Steve Ripley, who recommended that Bob Britt give that guitar to the OK Pop Museum that was in its developmental stages. So there's the
Oh,
back.
wow. Okay. That's
So
awesome.
Steve Ripley and Bob Britt made that
Okay.
possible for us to see that
Okay.
guitar.
Now, what guitars did like on Doctor of My Eyes? What would he have used there? Was that a Telecaster for that solo?
You know, I've talked to many people who wonder if it's a Telecaster or a Stratocaster. It's hard to say. I mean, I interviewed Jackson Brown a couple times and got firsthand accounts from him of that session. I talked to other people involved in that session, Lee Sklar and Russ Kunkel. Um, there's, the memories about exactly what amp and guitar he's using at particular sessions tend to be conflicting. I think it was his Telecaster, but I don't remember right now without looking at my notes just off the top of my head why
Okay.
I think that. I had a conversation with someone 5 or 6 months ago who feels really confident that it had to be a Stratocaster, and they made a pretty compelling case. I don't know. The fact is, Jesse would play all kinds of different guitars.
And that solo, it's kind of understated, but atypical of the time when everybody else might have been shredding and using distortion, and it's a cool solo, but it's not overindulgent. It's just I think I'd like to think it was just off the cuff during the recording session.
Well, it is a beautiful solo, the way that it comes to life and then it climbs and it does
Hmm.
these double stops and these just really kind of cool moves. And the tone is great and the playing is
Right.
great. Um, it um it was the version that we know. This was Jackson Brown's first ever top 10 hit. Jackson, when he spoke with me, credited Jesse for really making that a rock song. And to this day, Jackson's a great booster for Jesse's legacy because he feels sort of indebted to Jesse for helping make that song a hit. And as he explained it to me, um, Jesse went into the studio. He, put the headphones on. They were running the song. The drums weren't even on it. The drums on Dr. My Eyes are an overdub, actually. It was pretty
Really?
skeletal. What Jesse was hearing was primarily
Wow.
piano. And and perhaps Russ Kunkel's congas were already on the end, which is giving them that kind of beat. And
Right.
Jesse goes out, he's got the headphones on, and they're running it a little bit, and he's kind of talking back, like, okay, is this where are we at here? Is this the bridge? Is this where I come in? They're like, yeah, yeah. And he's like, okay, let's, hit record, play it, plays the solo. They stop, and they're, Jackson and the engineer or the producer, Richard Oshoff, are, kind of look at each other like, hey, it's yeah, sounding great, man. You wanna do one now? And Jesse says something to the effect of, no, that's it. Jack and the engineer are like, what do you mean? And Jesse says, I've got another session to go to. And that was it. That was it. That's the version we know. If I'm remembering correctly, there was one bit where Jesse's trying to pack up, and the engineer comes out and he's like trying to coax Jesse into touching the headstock of his guitar onto the amp to get a little feedback going. It was a little vibro champ, a little Fender vibro champ.
Oh, wow.
Remember Jackson remembered this part, and he's just had it cranked up, just cranked all the way, right? Really hot. And the engineer wants Jesse to produce a little feedback swell at the end. And Jackson remembers that Jesse was really kind of offended by this. Like he doesn't do tricks. Jesse doesn't do
Right.
the dog and pony show, right?
Right.
And he kind of sarcastically says, you know what? For you, I'll do it. And he does that little feedback move, and then he packs up and he moves on.
Oh, wow.
He was a busy guy in 1972, Jesse Ed Davis. He's all over the place. So you can imagine him just kind of flying around LA from session to session.
Right. And he played with John Lennon,
Yeah.
George Harrison, Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan called one of his albums, I forgot which album it was, but he called one of them the greatest album ever.
Dylan, who rarely does this, right? Bob Dylan is not someone who goes out into the media and gives you his my top 10 albums end of year playlist.
Right.
Bob Dylan
Right.
doesn't do that. And the fact that he did this speaks volumes. In a Rolling Stone interview in 1986, he called Jesse Ed Davis and John Trudell's album, AKA Graffiti Man, the best album of the year. And Bob would play the album before he took the stage during his concert tour that
Oh,
year.
wow.
This really did a lot to help raise John Trudell and Jesse Davis's profile. Bob would go out and see them live in LA. And you mentioned George Harrison too, a good, important friend of Jesse's and former collaborator. One night at the Palomino Club in early 1987, George Harrison and Bob Dylan went out to see the Graffiti Band play with Taj Mahal. And by the end of the night, George and Dylan were up on stage together doing a jam that became, sort of what I consider the sort of second great career peak of Jesse's life, from
Right.
the concert for Bangladesh to the concert at the Palomino this night. That sort of this famous gig.
Now, I heard about another jam that John Fogerty was involved in.
This is the one.
That's the same one.
This is
Okay.
the same one. So John Fogerty was in the crowd. John Fogerty's a big Taj Mahal fan and loved Jesse's guitar playing. And he didn't arrive with George and Bob. He was just there on his own to see Taj Mahal. And he gets up on stage too by the end of the night. By 2 o'clock in the morning, they're all up there. And Bob Dylan keeps telling John Fogerty to do a Creedence song. He keeps telling him, you got to sing Proud Mary. And I'm sure, Ken, you know this. If you know your CCR history,
Yeah,
Fogerty
John wouldn't
hadn't
do
played
it.
those songs
Right.
in,
Yeah.
almost 20 years by this point.
Right.
Finally, Dylan exhorts, if you don't play Proud Mary, everybody's going to think it's a Tina Turner song. And I guess that's what finally got Fogerty to crack.
Oh, wow.
And they played Proud Mary that night too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an
Oh,
amazing story. I talk about it in great detail in the book. It's a
oh
really
boy.
cool story.
to have been there, what an experience that would have been to have witnessed that. My goodness, I get
Indeed.
chills thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me some other songs. What other? We've talked a lot about Dr. Mize. Throw out some other songs where examples of sweet guitar work by Jesse Ed.
I love getting this question because it gives me an opportunity to maybe point some people toward albums that they don't know as well. Jesse played with everyone. You know this, Ken.
Right.
Bob Dylan, George Harrison, you already said George Harrison, John Lennon, Ringo Starr. He played with all the Beatles at some point. A jam session with Paul McCartney, not a professional recording, but at a jam. Um, Leon Russell, Rod Stewart in the Faces, Mick Jagger. We could do this the rest of the day. Um, Jesse also played with pop artists like Cher and David Cassidy. He played with country artists like Conway Twitty and Johnny Cash and Emmylou Harris and so forth. But one thing that I like to highlight is that Jesse also played with his heroes from when he was growing up. And he would listen to his parents, blues albums and jazz albums. And Jesse absolutely loved Albert Collins, Albert King, John Lee Hooker, B.B. King, and Jesse played with all of them. Lightning Hopkins. Jesse played with all of those great blues musicians who were his absolute heroes. So I always try to push people toward those records. Albert Collins, A Change Has Gotta Come. The John Lee Hooker album. Oh Lord, Endless Boogie, the BB King album, LA Midnight. These are really cool records to hear. Beyond that, some more, stuff that kind of flies under the radar. There's a Joe Cocker song called Black Eyed Blues. And Cocker released it as a single, but let me see. No, he put it on an album proper. It's a self-titled Joe Cocker album. I think he had two
Okay.
self-titled albums, so it gets a little confusing. A Joe Cocker song called Black Eyed Blues that is as good as you ever hear Jesse Davis. I mean, he's just killing it on this tune. It's such a heavy groove. I always tell people go listen to Black Eyed Blues. And one more. I love this David Blue album called Cupid's Arrow. Jesse plays on this album with Levon Helm on drums,
Oh wow.
Auburn Burrell on pedal steel, David Lindley on lap steel, and Donald Duck Dunn on bass guitar.
Oh my goodness.
Album is just beautiful. And I never meet anyone who knows this album. If they know David Blue at all, this isn't the album that they think of. Oh, it's incredible. This song called um, uh, Cordelia on David Blues, Cupid's Arrow. Man, go listen to what Jesse Davis is doing on that tune. I'm
Okay, well, I
sorry
know
for
as
going
soon as we
long.
get off here, I'm going to go out to YouTube and check, see if that's out there. My goodness.
It's
Yeah,
killer.
well, thanks for educating me on that. I had no idea. Had
Yeah,
no
sure.
idea.
Well, I could do that the rest of the day. So,
Well, tell
stop
us a
or
little
cut me
bit more
off.
about your book. You take a deep dive into, is it from childhood to his death? Basically, is that what you've done?
I appreciate that question too, because the first two chapters are all about Jesse's family. So the first chapter takes us back to his Native American ancestors way back into the 19th century. And I demonstrate there how Jesse comes from important ancestral lines from every direction. His family were filled with important political leaders, religious leaders, education leaders, military heroes, teachers, people who practiced the sun dance, and on and on and on and on. Tribal historians. So I want to show that Jesse comes from a particular range of cultural traditions and family
Okay.
members who established a precedent for him to go out and do great things in the world. The second chapter is all about his mom and dad, as I sort of tighten focus on how prominent they were as Native people in Norman and Oklahoma City as Jesse's growing up. And I like you asking me this question, Ken, because I plead with readers, don't skip the first chapters because you're so anxious to get to the part where Jesse's playing with Taj Mahal or John Lennon or whomever. For me, the first two chapters are actually the most important chapters in the entire book. So, start there and read about the worlds he came from because it tells us a lot about who Jesse was and why he did the things that he did.
And a lot of people don't realize that how you grew up and who you are defines your sound as a guitar player.
Absolutely. Jesse's father was a jazz drummer. He moonlighted as a jazz drummer. There's a club right down the street from their home in OKC, and Jesse would go listen to his dad play, and his dad would take him all around to around all the blues joints in town. His dad took him to see Elvis Presley, took him to see the Count Basie Orchestra, took him to see all kinds of great artists. And his mom was a piano player and a piano teacher. She was a performer. She would travel around the country performing Kiowa dances and songs and so forth.
Oh,
As
well,
you just said, Ken, we can't understand Jesse if we don't know the families he grew up in. And it does tell us so much about him and what the world meant to him as a Native American kid from Oklahoma who's going to go to Hollywood and New York City and Paris and London and Berlin and play with Bob Dylan and those formative experiences he had growing up in Oklahoma tell us so much about his heart and soul and what that meant for him. Yeah, there are people who will pick up the book and like, just talk about the music, man. We don't need to know about all this stuff. Who cares? Music is colorblind and these sorts of things.
right.
I couldn't do that with Jesse because he showed us and in his music, in his relationships with friends and family and romantic partners, and it's just sort of everything about the way that he interacted with the world, that being Kiowa, being Comanche was important to him. Look at his first solo album cover. It's right here. His father
Yes.
painted this. Jesse's father made this painting, and that's
Oh,
supposed
really?
to be Jesse smoking the Calumet, sitting cross-legged. This
Oh,
is how
cool.
he introduces himself when he becomes a solo artist in 1970 after he leaves Taj Mahal. I couldn't look at this record and say Jesse being native is not important. It was important to him in many ways. But one thing that I found so compelling about his story is that his career overlapped with the era of Red Power, the Wounded Knee occupation, the Alcatraz occupation, the takeover of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington in the early 1970s. All these things are happening at the same time as Jesse is launching his career. Jesse's not an American Indian movement guy, but he kind of knows that world too. And later on,
Right.
he'll sort of get more connected with that. I think of him as doing the kind of work that Native activists were doing in the early 1970s, but through a different medium. Jesse is telling people about Native people's humanity, about their place in the world, how they belong, and how they contribute to culture and they produce culture on their own terms. But he's doing it through music instead of street protest, if you will. And I think what he did is just as significant and just as important. And I really spent a lot of time thinking hard about that dimension of his life.
Okay. Now, the book title, The Washita Love Child, where did that come from? Did somebody refer to him as the Washita Love Child, or?
That's a great question. Um, And you pronounced it correctly, Ken. We know this, right? Because I often I get Washita, and then I get a little shy about correcting people's pronunciation. I never want to be that guy. But Washita Love Child was Jesse's autobiographical tune that
Okay.
appears on this album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he sings in this song, I was born on the banks of the Washita River in a Kiowa Comanche teepee. Daddy had a hard time. He means the war, right? And Mama made his eyes shine. And Lord, it was just us three, right? Father, mother, and son. They were a trio, just the three of them. Jesse was an only child. And when Jesse says he was born in a teepee, he's using some artistic license. He was born at the
Right.
Naval Hospital in Norman.
Right.
But the Washita River runs through that area, and the Washita country is Kiowa, Comanche, and Cheyenne country. what Jesse's doing there is he's connecting his artistry as he becomes a solo performer to his ancestors. He's further telling the world, this is where I come from. I come from the Kiowa people and the Washita River country. Sometimes when Jesse would perform live, I have some live recordings of him. When he would introduce his song Washita Love Child, he would say, now, you've all heard about the Wounded Knee Massacre, something like that. But he'd say, there was another massacre that went down in Oklahoma and called the Washita Massacre. And with this very kind of grave and poignant introduction to this song, right? He would tell his audiences, like as far away in New York, this is where my people survived this extraordinarily violent experience, and they lived through it, and they were resilient, and they demonstrated strength and fortitude, and they moved into the future. And he was telling the world, that's where I come from. Now the song itself is this spirited, joyous, danceable tune, really really cuts loose, and you'll sing along if you hear it. You won't be able to help it, but that's all encapsulated in that title, Washita Love Child. And I thought if Jesse used it for his autobiographical song, then what better title for the book?
Okay. Now, how do people get a hold of this book? Do you have a copy you can hold up for the camera?
Probably not.
Oh, okay. Well, I put you on the spot. I apologize for that.
Yeah, anytime I have a copy around, I end up giving it to someone.
Okay. Well, that's all right. Well,
You
tell
can
us.
get it anywhere. It's widely available. It's published by Norton, by Live Right Norton.
Okay.
It's all around. I mean, your favorite bookstore either has it on the shelf or they can order it easily from independent bookstores to the major chain bookstores. It's you can find it pretty much anywhere and everywhere. So just look, wherever you like to buy books, go get it there.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, I'm very grateful to you for writing that book. Just absolutely love it, and love the fact that you took a deep dive into his life and gave us an insight, not only about his music, about who he was as a person and his legacy. And partly because of your efforts, he's going to live forever.
Ken, my efforts and a lot of his surviving friends and family and bandmates and his fans. I mean, we've all been working hard to advance Jesse's profile and legacy. And, with that, thank you so much for bringing me onto your show. And
Oh,
this
you
was a
bet.
real pleasure for me. And I really enjoyed speaking about Jesse Davis with you.
Okay. Well, I have a feeling we might do a follow-up sometime.
Hey, I would love to. Just send the word and I'll be there for it. This was fun.
Okay.
Thank you, Ken.
All right. Thank you, Doug.